The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ed Koza, and we're going to be talking about brand tracking and how OSG can help you make your tracking more actionable. So thank you again for joining us. So a little bit about myself. My name is Ed Koza. I'm a vice president here at Optimal Strategics Group. I spent a lot of my career working on corporate side, managing different brand teams and insight teams. Made the move to OSG once I had exposure to some of their approaches. Really thought that they were powerful, and I've been here for 2 years. I've worked for companies like HP, Johnson & Johnson, Welch's, Sara Lee across my career. And now I'm thrilled to be and have been part of OSG for a long time. A little bit about OSG. So OSG is the catalyst for customer-centric growth. What that means is we focus both on behavioral and cognitive analytics to help our clients understand both the what and the why. So it's not enough just to understand how a customer makes a decision. We also work really hard to understand the why of why a customer makes a decision. We've been around for close to 10 years. We have offices around the world, and we've developed thought leadership and value to a variety of different companies. So thank you again for joining us today. So if you think about current brand tracking and what works and what doesn't work, obviously brand tracking it's an important metric to measure the value of your brand, the impact of your brand, and also to track the impact of various marketing activities in the marketplace. Too often, though, we see that brand tracking, which can have a large investment and a large part of a research budget, is not delivering the action and the insight that anybody really needs to make decisions. So it can tell you what's happening. It looks and can give you a scorecard, a KPI. But with many types of brand tracking, you're not getting the why. Why is this going on? And because a lot of brand tracking uses stated measures and ratings and so on, we often see that the breadth of responses is minimized. So you suffer from regression to the mean, if you will, because getting repeated, it gets tiresome, difficult for respondents to answer, and they work on just getting through it. And then finally, you see a lot of difficulty in identifying opportunities or for areas for improvement. Again, we recognize the importance of brand tracking, and we think we have a way to make it better. Here at OSG, we think about brand tracking as a very important way to help you stay ahead, to provide something that's actionable, but really help you stay ahead of the market and then of your competitors by getting a perspective on the marketplace and using brand tracking really as it's intended, as a leading indicator. So certainly scripts, share, all those different metrics, which are lag indicators, will follow, using brand tracking as a leading indicator to tell you, signal when you're doing something well, and you should enhance that or build upon it, or also as a leading indicator to indicate if you're starting to see some weakness or issues in the marketplace. We think that's an important component of brand tracking. So you really, again, just to emphasize, getting at the why behind what's going on in the marketplace. So like any brand tracking mechanism, it's important, of course, to understand the current market, to understand those traditional metrics that are often around brand awareness, around satisfaction. So we collect our brand funnels so that you can understand what's the awareness. Are you converting that awareness into consideration? Are you converting consideration into use and even preference, right? And of course, as a marketing leader, as an organization, you want to convert as much of that awareness into preference and usage as possible. And so by looking at this, you have, on an ongoing basis, you can see the progress you're making or where you may have opportunity to improve. Of course, we also collect, specific program recognition, be it detailing activity, claim detailing activity, receptivity, message reception, searches and so on. We collected all that. And then I think another important part that we capture, as you would expect in any brand tracking tool, would be satisfaction or a net promoter score. So obviously there's a lot of use around either satisfaction, loyalty, and or a net promoter score. And we have a way, we believe, to make that net promoter score more actionable. In some of my prior roles, I know that senior management and therefore the rest of the organization was very focused on the net promoter score and set goals each year, set compensation around that, but also it was a key indicator to understand the health of the brand and the health of the business. Oftentimes, as you come to report a net promoter score into your management, and you observe it and get a score maybe on a quarterly basis, coming back and not knowing why the score is where it is, what's going on, of course, can create a lot of issues and problems. What do we do? Okay, we know that our net promoter score has dropped by a point or by 3 points, or it's risen. What do we do about that? Do we need to do anything? And as we continue to talk here, we'll get a little deeper into that. A big part of our answer here at OSG is our proprietary trade-off exercise that was developed at Stanford, and it's called ASEMAP. ASEMAP lets you identify 35 to 40 different choice drivers that are important in the marketplace, and it's an algorithm that runs in real time for each individual. So we, as a respondent, is going through the online survey, and ASEMAP is running. We're getting an assessment of what's important to that individual. The power of that means that we're going to reduce the respondent fatigue. We're also going to, as we're measuring performance of competitive brands and your brand in the marketplace, we're going to focus on asking them to evaluate on what really matters to them, instead of going through a long list. So that helps with fatigue. And because this is a regression-based approach, it also lets us really get much more accurate results and not go to that regression to the center of the regression or the no mean, right? So let me talk to you a little bit more about it. It's actually quite a very simple process the way ASEMAP works. There's 3 major steps. So if we take our 35 to 40 choice drivers that are developed, we ask our respondents to first go ahead and sort them into 3 buckets. Bucket 1 are the choice drivers that are most important. Then you're going to have bucket 3, which are the choice drivers which are least important. We ask them to come back, then we now have 3 buckets. We ask them within each bucket to rank order again. So within a specific bucket, we'll have choice drivers ranked from 1 to 15, and then 16 to 30, and then finally 31 to 45 as an example. And then to really get where we really have the secret sauce, and the algorithm will go back, because we can understand for each individual, it's going to set up, the algorithm sets up pair comparisons. So now we're going to ask our respondents to trade off through a variety of pairs. And instead of just saying everything's important, they have to really take a stance and say what's more important. So in this case, what's more important, field strength or patient experience, and by how much? And because the algorithm is going to go through that, we're able at the end to come back and understand in real time during that survey what's most important, what's the biggest driver for each respondent, what's the least important driver, which we can then leverage through the rest of the instrument. So ASEMAP, as I mentioned, it was developed at Stanford. It's proprietary to OSG. No one else can do this. As I mentioned, when I came to OSG 2 years ago, one of the reasons I came here because a colleague was using ASEMAP, and I saw the power of it and what she was able to do for her business and impact those results. It got me to start looking deeper into ASEMAP and how to use it. But ASEMAP is unique. It gives you a higher accuracy and predictability versus a CBC model or another type of trade-off model. It lets you test more claims. Because you're sorting in the buckets, because you're then going to come back and rate on performance related to only what's important, you're able to evaluate more claims. As I mentioned, it's adapted for each individual. And it gives you the chance to look at small sample sizes and then now analyze results within small sample sizes. So for a driver score, we need 25 to 30 respondents in any segment. So we can look at users, non-users. We can look at users of specific brands to see what's important. If you think about an NPS score, you can look at the detractors versus the promoters. So being able to work with these much smaller sample sizes than traditional driver scores really gives you the power to get under the hood and understand what's going on. So it's an example of what things look like within ASEMAP. You get your drivers of choice, what's important. And so you're going to see a score of 100 is average, and then you'll see the breadth of scores. And again, you can look at this for individuals or different individual groups and segments. The other important part of this is you get the performance on specific brands by what's important. So you can take, for instance, recognized for high quality, for quality products, we see in this example that's the most important driver in the category. Then you can look and see how the different brands are actually doing against that. So, and by comparing, you can see where your brand strengths and weaknesses lie, but also where your competitors' strengths and weaknesses lie to give you the actionability that you need. As we continue to put all this together, we really use ASEMAP as a lead indicator for customer satisfaction. What do we mean by that? So in this quadrant analysis, we're looking at the driver score, what's more and less important. So we use our driver scores in the top part of our quadrant here. These are the choice drivers that are most important, and at the bottom, these are the choice drivers that are least important. And then if we take that and we look at how well the different needs are being met across the marketplace, so how understanding the experience that customers have across the marketplace, we're able to map how well are those needs met today. So on the right-hand side of the quadrant are the needs that are not being met as well today. On the left side are those drivers that are being met by the category today. So if you think about in this upper left-hand quadrant, this is an area that's important, compelling to your customer, but where you also see that needs are being met. So we often consider these table stakes or cost of entry. What you can layer on as a third dimension, though, is this idea of how you're performing versus your competition. So for those green balls, that means that your brand is actually outperforming the competitor. So you look at this is a cost of entry, you're outperforming your competitor. Do you need to pull back and focus your messaging elsewhere, or is there an opportunity to dimensionalize this to make this even more important and differentiated? On the upper right-hand quadrant, also very important, these are the choice drivers that are important, but where the marketplace isn't delivering. So there's less satisfaction with the experience, more of an opportunity. And so again, you can take a look how you're doing relative to your competition. So if something's working well, if you're starting to gain leadership over competition, do you want to use that to dial up some of your communications, to double down, to focus? If you see quarter over quarter that you're not making progress in this area, it may be time to reassess your spend. It's time to perhaps reassess the messaging that you're putting out there against these areas. Also, of course, to understand what your competitors are doing. So as you can see, this becomes a very valuable tool in terms of understanding what's driving the category and what's going to be important in the future. So I talked a little bit about Net Promoter Score, and it's a KPI. It was developed at Bain several years ago. And the frequent complaint that you'll hear about a Net Promoter Score, or NPS, is that I don't get a lot of detail. I walk away with a number, but I ultimately don't understand the why behind it. And if you think about the way a Net Promoter Score is computed, of course it takes, and many of you may already know how this is done, but it takes the promoters, anyone who rates the likelihood to recommend you or a competitive brand, these are among users, a 9 or a 10, they become a promoter. And then anyone who rates it a 6 all the way down to a 0 on this 11-point scale, they're classified as detractors. So your net promoter score is very simply the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. So if you think about it, you can get, if you have an NPS score of 40, you can get there in a variety of ways. You may have 60% who are promoters and 20% who are detractors. Yet in the same scenario, and just to make an extreme example, you may see that you have a very polarized group, and you may see that you have 90% who are promoters. And again, I've never seen 90% as a score, and I'm just being exaggerating this, but 50% who are detractors, which would indicate that you have a lot of dissatisfaction. So it's important as you look at a net promoter score, not only to understand the overall score, but what proportion are promoters versus detractors and even passives, and then understanding that why behind the deal. So the way we make NPS more actionable and much more insightful is to take the net promoter score, take that rating, and compare it with the ASEMAP exercise. Because everybody's driving and telling us, going through the ASEMAP exercise to designate what's most important, what are their most important choice drivers, what are their least important. And because ASEMAP lets us look amongst small groups of respondents and still have the rigor and analytics that we need to have, we can combine those two. We can look, for instance, at detractor. What is it that drives a detractor? What's most important to them? And then even how do they see how your brand performs in those areas? And you can do the same with your group of passives and promoters. So you may find that a promoter has a very different set of choice drivers than a passive. And so you can start to talk to passives about what drives a promoter to start to move those. Because in theory, you want to move a detractor into a passive, and you want to move a passive into being a promoter for your brand. And you can only do that if you understand what drives them and what the differences are between those groups, which is exactly what ASEMAP lets you do. So as an example, and this is something that we've done, for instance, for a large biopharma company, we are able to look at what was driving the overall experience. And we looked both among detractors for their brand and among promoters. And we were able to see the differences so that we could go back and start to talk about how to move these individuals, these groups of people along to really impact the NPS score. So again, it's the combination of traditional metrics with the build-on of ASEMAP. So, this just takes that case study. We wanted to really understand for this large biosimilar company, what were the key experience that define the customer experience overall. If you think about biosimilars are highly commoditized. A lot of biosimilar companies compete on price. Can you get to the lowest price and satisfy payers and what they're looking for? And that's certainly what KOLs are looking for. And so we went and we did a worldwide study where we went to 5 different markets, and we talked to all kinds of different stakeholders. Our stakeholders included physicians, nurses, key opinion leaders, payers, and by fielding this study around the world to really understand, and using ASEMAP in conjunction with NPS and with awareness, we're really able to understand for our client, help them to define what a differentiated experience would look like within the biosimilars category. What triggers did they need to focus on? How did they convert a lot of passives into promoters? Where did their brand sit? And by coming back and really helping them to understand, it led to the optimization of their marketing plan and also helped to prioritize the segments and stakeholders to speak with. So I think that's a great example. And ASEMAP, because of the way ASEMAP's been done, it's been shown that it actually takes some of the bias, if you will, around the world. So if you think about a German respondent, Germans are well known to be very, very strict use of the scales, to have the expectations come through and how they rate companies and brands and so on. And so it's often hard to compare a lot of metrics around the world. But when you use ASEMAP, because it's a gamifying choice driving and really helping to understand that, you take away that worldwide bias and you're actually able to compare results around the world, different countries, which is another important and valuable aspect that we see within ASEMAP. So something else that we like to talk about. So that's using, traditional, if you will, online surveys, bolting on, adding on the differentiated proprietary ASEMAP tool that OSG offers. Of course, today we're online 24 hours a day. All of us use social media. All of us are doing searches. We're having conversations, personal, professional. You think about this idea of one life where our work and our personal lives blend together. There's a lot more of continuity. So how can we help you get to that 360-degree view of your customer, what they're saying about your brand, not only in the middle of a survey, but also any conversations we're having? That's where we apply CAVIT. CAVIT is our big data analytics management platform. It's a software as a service platform, and it really gives you that 360 view. It's powered by IBM Watson and several other big data analytics engines that let us really bring in. And this way you get a single source, a single view of your respondent. What are they saying on the survey? With their permission, we can also understand what kind of searches are they doing, what kind of social media conversations are they having, and so on. So it gives you a much deeper look into your customer, into your respondent, and gives you an ongoing look. So we often use, whereas we can use the survey on a quarterly basis, for instance, or biannually, with CAVIT, we get this continuous look to really have a true dashboard, and we turn that into dashboards. We can give you a pulse, an update that's updated every week in terms of what's being said, what's the sentiment around your brand, how many conversations are you appearing in, what's that. It gives you a sense. You can start to look where there's peaks and valleys and dive deeper into what's being said and so on. So it's much more than a social sentiment tool. It actually can ingest structured, unstructured data from any source that you can think of. If you can name it, this CAVIT platform is able to inject it into the machine and come back with an analysis. So CAVIT it's looking for these market signals that with traditional analytics would not be noticeable. It's looking at text analytics. It can use facial imaging. So imagine if somebody's using Snapchat or something or Instagram, they're having a conversation about your category, about your brand, about your drug, and it can capture, again, with respondent permission. Of course, that's important, but we can actually capture the image and analyze what was the mood, what was being said, what were the feelings underneath there, and it's searching for speech analytics. So there's a lot of power to this tool that can be harnessed to really go much deeper for brand tracking, to understand brand health and uncover opportunities and also potential issues at a much earlier stage. It makes this extremely powerful. So as we conclude here, as we get close to the end, I want to just leave you with some food for thought. To make your brand tracking more effective, make sure you understand what matters to your customers. By understanding what really matters to them, that's how you're going to be able to really action for the future. When you understand the brand ratings, understand what matters to brand ratings on what matters to that individual. Use communities. We can address sample quality and really understand this digital 360-degree view to understand the why. So when you understand the why behind your performance, you're going to have much more effective tracking. So with that said, we'd love to talk to you more. We'd love to share with you more examples of what we've done, how we can help you, how we can help you address your brand tracking in a cost-effective way that significantly improves what you're doing today and really helps you understand the why. So with that, So Geeta, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Ed, for an insightful presentation. We have one question. You talked about lead and lag indicators. So how can companies leverage social listening as a lead indicator?
That's great. Well, thank you for whoever offered up that question. So social listening is a great way to leverage these. We can use IBM Watson and a few other tools that I mentioned within the machine language. But it's important to keep in mind, though, social listening can be biased. What we're going to find is those who are talking about your brand, about your category, about your drug, those are the folks who are either extremely happy and big advocates, or they're the folks who are extremely disappointed and have a high level of dissatisfaction. But by paying attention to those extremes, you certainly can use that as a lead indicator. You can start to see it helps you adjust your survey mechanisms, and also within CAVIT to start to look to see is that signal becoming louder or more frequent of a signal, so that you can start to hop on that issue even faster than just with plain traditional analytics that you would get through an online survey. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Ed. And to all the attendees, we'll have this presentation on our website at www.osganalytics.com in about a day. And with that, we thank you for attending this webinar and wish you a very good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.